Embalming of Tudors. The Tudors were the most well-known royal family in England's history. Some of their rulers, like King Henry VIII, were notorious for their harshness. Henry VIII even had two of his wives killed at the Tower of London. His children later became rulers too. His eldest daughter was called Bloody Mary because she had many people burned at the stake. However, the most successful Tudor ruler was Queen Elizabeth I, who beat the Spanish Armada and faced down several other challenges to her rule. When Tudor monarchs died, their bodies were treated in ways that would now be seen as harsh and shocking. One story that stands out is about the embalming of the Tudor kings and queens. For instance, Arthur Tudor, the first son of King Henry VII and heir to the throne, died young in 1502 at Ludlow Castle. He was just married and had fallen sick with a disease known as the sweating sickness. As the storms battered the castle, his servants prayed for his recovery, but he passed away only 5 months after his wedding. News of Prince Arthur's death was rushed to London, taking 2 days to reach King Henry VII at Greenwich Palace. The king and queen were heartbroken by the loss of their eldest son, and following Arthur's death, arrangements for his funeral began, which included the embalming of his body. Embalming was common for royal figures in Europe at the time, and it was performed by specialized doctors and surgeons. This practice, which was expensive and usually reserved for the most important people, helped preserve the body from decay and allowed it to be transported long distances if needed. Embalming also made it possible to display the bodies publicly before they were buried. During the Tudor era, the process started with washing and removing the insides of the body, which included cutting and cleaning it with disinfectant liquids. The empty spaces were then filled with nice-smelling herbs and spices like thyme and lavender. After cleaning, the intestines and other internal parts were often taken out and sometimes buried separately at the place where the person had died. Even the heart was sometimes removed. For instance, Queen Jane Seymour's heart was buried at Hampton Court Palace, where she passed away. Once prepared, the body was wrapped in cerecloth, a type of waxed cloth, and sealed with beeswax. It was then placed in a lead-lined wooden coffin filled with dry herbs that smelled nice. Additional balms and ointments were used to dry out the body further. For example, Prince Arthur's body was thoroughly embalmed inside Ludlow Castle where he died. It was treated with spices and sweet substances provided by those in charge. His embalming was so good that his body did not need to be put in a lead case, but was instead placed in a wooden chest. It laid there for 3 weeks, delaying decay until his burial. The following year after Arthur's death, his mother Elizabeth of York died shortly after giving birth inside the Tower of London. Her body was washed with wine and rose water, embalmed, placed in a lead-lined coffin, and then covered with a black velvet cloth. Even the infamous King Henry VIII had his body embalmed after his death in 1547. There are stories that his heart was removed. His embalming process involved thorough cleaning and preparation using spices and was handled by surgeons. They used various ingredients like cloves, oil of balm, myrrh, and musk, divided into several parts and placed in the coffin for the embalming process. The embalming of King Henry VIII was an expensive affair, costing thousands. His internal organs and heart were believed to be buried in a lead box at the Palace of Westminster's Chapel. His body was then moved to St. George's Chapel in Windsor and placed in a vault under the floor. Henry VIII's son, Edward VI, also died young, like Arthur Tudor. He passed away on the 6th of July, 1553, after a brief rule, but wasn't buried until the 8th of August due to the warm weather, which delayed his burial and made his embalming crucial to prevent decay. Mary I was also embalmed after her death. Surgeons removed her internal organs, which were solemnly buried in the chapel, with her heart placed separately in a velvet and silver-bound coffer. The process continued even against the wishes of some, like Elizabeth I, the greatest Tudor queen. She had a strong fear of embalming and had requested not to be embalmed. However, after her death, the royal physicians did not honour her request. They embalmed her, stuffing her body with herbs and spices. It's rumoured that gases built up inside her remains, causing her body to burst, damaging her coffin on the way to her funeral. Tudor embalming was not for the faint-hearted. It involved opening the body, removing organs, and then cleansing and stuffing it with herbs to preserve it and keep it smelling fresh. This was supposed to slow down decay, and despite her fears and specific requests, Elizabeth I's ministers did not follow her wishes after she died. The way Tudors handled embalming reveals much about their approaches to death and the afterlife. It was a fascinating, albeit shocking, aspect of their rule.